I have spent most of my life in rooms where silence is heavy, where the air smells of steel, disinfectant, and something far more permanent. For decades, I worked as a forensic doctor between hospitals, morgues, and courts of law. I have examined the dead in every condition imaginable, and for years I believed I had seen it all. Nothing could shake me. Not mutilations, not drownings, not the aftermath of road accidents, suicides, or even the darkest homicides. For me, it was routine, clinical, scientific. And yet, there was one night that left me with a fear I can never explain. I can recall countless cases where the horror was not in the sight of the body itself, but in the unanswered questions it left behind. A man found lifeless in the street. An old woman discovered only when the neighbors finally noticed the smell. A body floating in the sea with no story to tell. I had learned to untangle these puzzles, to differentiate suicide from murder, to read the skin and bones as if they were pages in a book. But in 2004, after 25 long years in this profession, I faced something that tore a hole through everything I thought I knew about life, death, and the limits of science. It was a stormy night when the body arrived. A man, perhaps 30 to 40 years old, delivered to me completely naked, his skin torn with lacerations, fragments of wood embedded in the wounds. At first glance, I estimated he had been dead for 2 days, his skin already showing the unmistakable signs of decomposition. The report said a man walking his dog through a forest had found him. Simple enough, I thought. Another examination, another routine night. I began the usual procedure. His fingers were intact enough for fingerprints, so identification seemed possible. I prepared my instruments and started the first incisions. That's when I noticed something I couldn't explain. The blood. It didn't behave like it should. It flowed as though he had died only a few hours ago, fresh and red, gushing where there should have been only dark, thick traces. His skin told me he was long dead, but his blood told me otherwise. That was the first contradiction. As I continued, I saw more. The man had no body hair, not unusual in itself, though rare. On his shoulder, I found unmistakable human bite marks, and I carefully extracted DNA from the site. My hands were steady, my mind focused, but then something happened that stopped me cold. His hand trembled on the table. At first, I told myself it was post-mortem spasm, a natural twitch after death. I had seen such movements before, but they only occur within the first 24 hours. This man had been dead 2 days. That was the second contradiction. Still, I pressed on. I prepared to open his abdomen, and there, under the harsh light of the morgue, I found the detail that has haunted me ever since. The body had no navel, not hidden, not scarred from surgery, simply absent, smooth skin where there should have been a mark of birth. I froze, my gloved hand hovering over his abdomen, my mind racing. A navel is proof that we are born, that we come into this world through the bond of a mother. This man had none. It was as if he had never been born at all. In that moment, I remembered strange stories I had once dismissed as fiction, tales of beings created artificially, clones that carried no umbilical scar. My rational mind resisted, but the evidence before me left no easy explanation. I felt a cold unease creep up my spine. For the first time in my career, I needed someone else beside me. I called a colleague, waking him in the middle of the night. He was angry at first, but when I explained, his irritation turned into curiosity. While waiting, I turned back to the body. That's when I noticed his head. When he first arrived, his face had been staring upward. Now it was turned to the side. I told myself again it was another twitch, another spasm. But then his head shook violently, and the body exhaled. Not a faint release of trapped air, not the subtle sigh I'd sometimes heard in decomposition. This was vivid, alive, terrifying.
When I touched his skin, my fear deepened. He was warm. A corpse grows cold quickly after death, cooling to room temperature within hours. But his body was heating up, as if life, or something else, was returning to it. My thoughts blurred between science and something I did not want to name. Before I could act, I heard a sound, the body falling from the table. I checked the table for faults, but it was solid. The body had moved by itself. I felt fear for the first time in my career, real fear. I left the room and waited for my colleague. When he arrived, I told him everything. He dismissed it all, my nerves, my imagination, perhaps fatigue. Together we went into the room, but the body was gone. Only a streak of blood marked the floor where it had fallen. My colleague accused me of joking, of staging some elaborate prank. Then we both froze, because in the corner of the room, the corpse was sitting upright, its lifeless eyes fixed in our direction. My folder slipped from my hands. My colleague laughed nervously, still convinced it was some trick. But when he touched the body's face, the laughter stopped. His hand recoiled as if burned. Later, he confessed what he felt, that the man's skin burned with heat, as though with fever, and worse, he felt a pulse beneath the flesh. We both knew then that this was no ordinary cadaver. We heard the morgue door creak open, though no one else should have been there. Panic rooted us in place. When we checked, the body was gone again. We turned to the security cameras, desperate for answers. What we saw will stay with me forever. The footage showed everything. The head turning by itself, the fall from the table, the body dragging itself across the floor using only its arms, pulling its dead weight like some grotesque creature. When we entered the room earlier, the body had tried to rise, but collapsed, ending in the sitting position where we had found it. The next day, the fingerprints came back. No record, no match in the registry. Officially, this man never existed. Soon after, the police accused us of theft, of losing a corpse. We thought our careers were over. But mysteriously, our superiors intervened. The case was silenced. We were forced to sign papers, confidentiality agreements drafted by lawyers. In exchange, the charges disappeared, as though the whole event had never happened. My colleague returned to his work, though I could see in his eyes the shadow of what we had witnessed. I chose to leave. I retired, unable to walk those halls again. We never spoke of it to each other, not once. Now, years later, I no longer care about the consequences. My life is behind me, my career long over. I speak of it only to leave the truth somewhere, for someone, in case the same thing happens again. That night proved to me that not everybody in a morgue belongs to this world. Some are something else. And if you ever find yourself in a room with one of them, pray that it stays still.